to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a former plastic surgeon and the author of the medical fiction book, The Big Prick, with a second medical fiction book, Fighting Gravity, soon to be released. Additionally, he has authored a pair of medical nonfiction books. His name is Dr. Michael Godin, and here's my interview with Dr. Godin. Dr. Michael Godin, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, well, I'm Michael Godin. I am a practicing facial plastic surgeon and also an author. And I think what brought me to the attention of this podcast is that I've recently published a book, my first novel. It's entitled The Big Prick, Surgery, Surfing, and Survival in 1980s San Diego. It's available on Amazon as an ebook and a paperback, and it combines the world of medical fiction with humor and romance. I recommend it to you. The reviews have been good, and it's been a joy for me to, in addition to my medical practice, branch out and do something different. So I guess that's why I am here.
Why did you decide to set The Big Prick in 1980s era San Diego?
Well, you write what you know, Aaron, and I was an intern during that time, and that just happened to coincide with the beginning of the HIV epidemic. And we were in a position where we were training, and we really didn't know much about the disease. Medical science had no answer for the disease, so it was an interesting and frankly terrifying time to learn how to do surgery on desperately ill people. And I thought that would make for an interesting context for the novel.
You have an upcoming medical fiction book that'll be titled Fighting Gravity. Without spoiling too much of Fighting Gravity, what will that be about?
Well, the first book, which is The Big Prick, follows the career of Nick Jordan, who is an intern in surgery, and his colleagues as well. And there certainly is a lot of medical drama and tension in that, but there's also humor, there's also romance. And Fighting Gravity will be the next step in Nick's journey. So we'll take him beyond the intern year into his residency fellowship training, early career, and even middle age, when he finds himself going through a divorce and has to enter the world of modern dating.
How did your background as a plastic surgeon help you with writing medical fiction?
Well, I've always been a writer, and was a kind of a double biology English major in college, and I've written a lot of scientific articles. I've written textbooks on surgery, so I've always been writing, but I always wanted to write something in the fiction realm. And I had this in mind for a long time, but certainly the experiences that I gained in medicine informed the book and helped me come up with a lot of the material.
You've written a couple of, wait, I'm going to go to that question a little bit later. How long did it take you to write The Big Prick and Fighting Gravity, respectively?
Well, Fighting Gravity actually came first, and that book took me about 5 years to write. It was a fairly long book, about 100,000 words, translate out to maybe about 400 pages. What I wanted to do was I wanted to write a prequel to that book that was a little bit shorter and would hopefully engage readers and help me to build a readership. And so the idea of The Big Prick was appealing. That book took me about a year to write, so a little bit shorter. And I guess the big news is that the Fighting Gravity, the sequel, I'm now looking at actually adding some material and making that into 2 books, so that I'll have a series. I'll have The Big Prick, Fighting Gravity, and I don't have a title for the 3rd book yet. If any of our listeners want to suggest something, I would be all ears, but that's how it came about.
You've written a couple of medical nonfiction books, and I think this was a long time before you started writing medical fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, without spoiling too much of your medical nonfiction books, what are each of them called and what are each of them about? And I think one of them's out of print now.
Right. So the first book I wrote was called "The Surgery Survival Guide: A Manual for Interns and Precocious Medical Students." And I wrote that at the end of my uh, uh, internship year, and it was kind of a cathartic thing because that year was just way harder and way more emotionally draining than I than I thought it would be. And I think to deal with that emotionally, that's why I wrote a book to try to make things easier for people who came after me. And I actually published that book myself. We sold it. My mother was my only employee, and I say employee jokingly because we just worked together, and she helped me out a lot. But we sold it at every medical bookstore in the U.S. and Canada, pretty much. And it had 3 editions. It had a good run, and I think helped the interns kind of make that transition. Then I wrote a book on nasal surgery called Rhinoplasty Cases and Techniques, and that book did very well. That was by TIME, THIEME, medical publishers in out of Germany and New York. They're actually the oldest continuously running medical publisher in the world, I believe. And that book did very well. It was one of the best-selling rhinoplasty textbooks in the world for about a year and a half. Continues to sell, continues to be available. And I'm coming out with a second edition with my co-author, Dr. Jason Hamilton in Los Angeles. Jason is a phenomenally talented rhinoplasty surgeon and just facial surgeon. And he has come on board and done most of the work on the second edition of Rhinoplasty Cases and Techniques. So that will be out from TIMA Medical Publishers hopefully this year.
What was the biggest adjustment you had to make to writing fiction after writing a couple nonfiction books?
I would say engaging the creative process. When you write a medical textbook, it's pretty cut and dried. You know what you need to write about. It's more about gathering the proper content, having the images, getting in co-authors who are experts in their fields. Writing nonfiction is all about doing the research and putting it down on the page. Writing fiction is about creating. So that's a whole different mindset. I had to kind of develop a scheme to help me do that. I'm not a discovery writer. I don't just start writing and see where it leads. I plot things out. So I have, if you could see my writing study right now, I have these cork boards with 80 different index cards on them, which is each one is a different scene. And I sort of developed my own process, read some books on how to do it and developed my own process about how to write creatively and how to construct a novel with, various storylines and how to weave those together. So it was a completely different process than writing a medical textbook.
Are all your books self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published, or did you use multiple publishing methods for your books?
So for the medical ones, the first one was the intern guide was self-published. The rhinoplasty book was traditionally published through TIMA. The book that I'm doing now is, I guess you could consider it a hybrid. I have a wonderful, I think, publisher in Florida, Gatekeeper Press, and they helped me a lot. But I had to finance a good part of that. So I guess you could say it's self-published, but through a real publisher rather than doing everything yourself. So I considered the third one to be a bit of a hybrid.
What was your favorite aspect of being a plastic surgeon?
I'm gonna say, working with the patients really, and my staff. It's all about the people, and just at the end of the day, we want a happy patient, and we have to have the right kind of atmosphere to create that. I work with a wonderful staff, and they make my work kind of a joy every day. And then to see the reaction of the patients, as they recover and they start to see the changes and their positive changes that they really desperately wanted to create, and I've been successful in helping them do that. So that's a deep sense of satisfaction, I would say.
Also, to clear up a lot of confusion some people have about plastic surgery, not all of it is purely elective, from what I understand.
That's right. And really, a lot of times you hear the phrase plastic and reconstructive surgery. So when you're doing a reconstructive surgery, you're taking a feature that is somehow damaged or in disarray, and you're trying to uh, restore that to a more normal function or appearance. A nasal fracture, a facial laceration, a reconstruction after a cancer removal, that kind of thing. Cosmetic surgery, of course, is taking essentially normal anatomy and making it more what the patient would like. Very often, that's reversing the aging process. Somebody's neck starts to go. We firm that up, the jawline, the eyelids. But it can also be taking a feature like the ears are sticking out too far, and the child's being teased in school, so we set them back, or they have a nose that they don't like, and we help them with that. So it is a balance between cosmetic and reconstructive surgery in the field of facial plastic surgery.
Dr. Godin, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing guest.
You're so nice. Thank you. It was my pleasure, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
I wish Dr. Godin well with the release of Fighting Gravity. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.